If a child says they do not feel comfortable with their body, hell, if they simply admit to liking something stereotypical of the other sex, someone will appear with the suggestion, maybe you're trans. The phrase is a common one in Discord servers, Tumblr ask boxes, and TikTok comment sections alike. An egg waiting to crack, they say. And after a while, the child believes it. If everyone says that this feeling is actually an identity to be accepted and embraced instead of scrutinized and thought over, they'll agree. And once you're in the club, it's very hard to leave. Soon, everyone is supporting you. Everyone is like you. It's just you and your fellow NBs against the hostile world, and that includes anyone who tries to ask if there's another solution to your problem. First, there'll be the suggestion that you come out to your parents. And say you do, and they are relatively liberal and maybe just believe that it's a phase, not dissimilar to their own goth or mallrat phase when growing up. So they tell you, of course we support you. Of course we'll always love you. So then you'll ask for a binder or female clothing, and this seems easy enough, so they do it. And then your pronouns change, and you need more and more to validate your gender. You need your sister to not complain when you steal her pads. You need your parents to sign off on hormones, on gender-affirming care. But eventually, they might decide, this is enough. This is permanent, this is disturbing, and we love you, but no. And that is the moment that the background revelation of suicide in the trans community comes into play. See, from the very start, people are told that being trans is a dangerous position to be in due to a high risk of death, either self-inflicted through suicide or murder from an intolerant right-wing bigot. They are told that they must be affirmed, and anything other than that will lead to suicide and death. Would you rather have a trans kid or a dead kid? Respecting pronouns is suicide prevention. Trans people are the most oppressed because they have the highest rates of suicide. Have you told your parents about your plan to transition? I wouldn't do that. They could be transphobic. You should run away from home because it's not safe. There is a 30% chance of me dying before I reach age 30 because I'm trans. If you don't allow children to make permanent medical decisions, then they'll literally die. And yet, all the while, they argue that this is not a mental illness. It's just an internal discomfort with one's body that can only be treated by medical help. This sense of overwhelming danger is a large part of the grooming aspect of the trans community, which prevents questioning the potential downsides of transitioning. For one, trans people are one of the safest demographics, and outside of prostitution, are unlikely to be murdered. In fact, women are far more likely to be murdered and raped even in the US, but you won't hear anyone talking about a femicide problem. Unlike the many programs centered around trans suicide prevention, where people like to quote the 1 in 12 statistic, which is about 8%, when in 2021 there was an estimated 1.4 million trans people in the US and only 57 murders, a rate of 0.004%. There were 357 trans homicides globally, which is still only 0.03% of the US trans population alone. Meanwhile, according to the CDC, homicide is the fourth leading cause of death for girls and women 1 to 19 years old, and the fifth leading cause of death for women 20 to 44. Of all female homicides accounted for in 2018, where the relationship between perpetrator and victim could be identified, 92% of cases involved women or girls killed by a man they knew, 63% of whom were killed by current husbands, ex-husbands, or current boyfriends. This puts confirmed American female intimate gendered killings happening at a staggering rate of almost 3 women every day. Those circumstances are drastically different from men's who are killed by other men in 3/4 of cases, and in over 1/4 of those cases by strangers. And this drastically dwarfs the number of trans people who are murdered, which is in contrast very rare and centered around those who participate in a very dangerous profession. The atmosphere of fear is self-created. By pushing on the concept that not providing unequivocal support is equal to a valid reason for suicide, they are continuing to give people a reason to kill themselves. Take a look at the recent law in Texas, which only says that children cannot have procedures that would have permanent and debilitating effects on them. This law has been equivalated to physically killing trans kids, and caring activists outside of the state have used this as an opportunity to offer their help. Run away from your parents, because if they don't let you take hormones, you'll kill yourself. Come live with me, a trustworthy trans ally instead. Every act that doesn't validate their identity is a physical threat to their identity and therefore must be treated as such. The way that trans suicide is even reported adds to this issue. Suicide contagion is a major problem, especially among young and already vulnerable groups, and there are journalistic guidelines on how suicide stories should be reported, though of trans stories, they are often ignored. The use of the word suicide, or the method used, is not supposed to be in headlines, and oversimplifying and sensationalizing the issue is to be avoided. They're supposed to steer clear of presenting suicidal behavior as an understandable response to crisis or adversity. This can contribute to an unhelpful and risky normalization of suicide as an appropriate response to distress. Speculation about the trigger or cause of suicide can oversimplify the issue and should be avoided. Suicide is an extremely complex issue, and most of the time, there is no single event or factor that leads someone to take their own life. In contrast, during the early 2010s, gay youth were typically told that it gets better, it'll be okay, and one day we would be happy because the struggle was not forever. Coming out wasn't the right choice for everyone, and if you did and your parents didn't immediately accept you, you could still hope for change down the line or find family in the community if they never did. Those are the expectations that were set for gay kids. Why is it all the opposite for these opt-in identities? I believe that it's because these identities are opt-in. One can choose to not be trans by not treating their gender dysphoria with sexual reassignment surgery. This is something you opt into, that you actively choose, and as a fad, it appeals to preteens and teenagers just like cutting and anorexia appealed to previous generations. If they told kids to wait, to give them a chance to grow out of it, they would, and trans kids would become regular adults without all the fuss of coming out as trans, though many would indeed become at ease with their homosexuality in adulthood instead. And that's why they have to make this urgent. Transition or die, and anything else must be demonized because otherwise there won't be trans kids anymore, and that growing number of trans people would drastically drop. The AGPs who spearhead the movement need to perpetuate the lie that trans identities are innate and immutable because they need the validation that comes in response. These kids are convinced that the world hates them. Being told that the cis wants you dead and anything a woman does is to spite you leads to a victim complex that forces trans kids down a road of transitioning or dying. Because the truth is, most people do go along with this delusion. Most people see trans people as a minority group in need of support, no different from supporting gay rights or Black Lives Matter. It's the trans community who are constantly suicide baiting themselves. Suicide is glorified into something that can be attained like martyrdom if transition is not possible. Never mind that suicide rates actually increase after transition and that sex reassigned people have considerably higher risk for suicidal behavior and psychiatric morbidity. Never mind that the claim that one needs transitioning to survive is fundamentally ableist as it leads to lifelong medical care. By medically transitioning, trans people induce a disability in themselves, sucking up medical resources which would otherwise go to people who can't help their disabilities. People were legitimately complaining that women with breast cancer were getting surgery before elective mastectomies, and equated being trans with the same life-saving care that someone suffering from cancer would receive. Pain becomes an intrinsic part of the trans experience because the pain of mutilating their bodies is considered to be life-affirming care that proves the validity of their dysphoria. If we can't change this narrative, it's liable to spread. After all, being a victim feels good. It's profitable. It gets you attention, and it makes your life feel far more exciting than being middle class and healthy ever could. Social contagion is a hell of a drug, and unlike every fad that passes over in a year or two, this one is going to have long-lasting effects on those who buy into it. This, dear viewers, is where we part. This video is hopefully one that goes over well. As you may remember, I am a psychology major. I'm hoping to go into therapy after I graduate undergrad, and I've just had a lot of personal experience with mental health issues and suicide. In my own family, I've had just a lot of mental health issues. Schizophrenia runs in the family on my mom's side. I've seen several people just completely change when they deal with mental health issues. And if they wouldn't let my cousin who has schizophrenia do stuff like get tattoos or control his money when he's having a phase, they really shouldn't do the same for people who are minors especially, but minors and threatening suicide if they don't get their way. I just really do feel like suicide has always been kind of glorified as like the biggest final F you could give to a world you dislike. I understand that. I completely do. Sometimes I'll have like a really shitty, horrible week, like failing classes, can't pay bills, and I'm just sitting there like, you know what? If this one more thing goes bad, I will do it. And I get the feeling it's a way to lash out at the world that feels hostile. But glorifying it in this way in a community that's already prone to mental health issues, it's just downright dangerous. And it leads to this cycle of, if you can't get your way, then you should kill yourself. There are no other solutions offered here. Even the concept of getting therapy that doesn't immediately just affirm this is being treated like the same thing as gay conversion therapy. And it's not. There's a difference between you should be something that you're not and a therapy that just completely supports everything that you already have in mind. That's not how therapy works. Anyhow, I will be talking about the equation of gay conversion therapy, of trans conversion therapy, because that is an interesting topic, and I love talking about psychology. If you guys have any comments, concerns, questions, ideas, anything you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments down below. I'm debating if I should start some kind of comment of the week thing, because sometimes you guys say some really smart things that I want more people to see. And I don't know if everyone else reads through every comment section and every video like I do. It's my video, so obviously I'm more invested. But I definitely like to get more of that sense of community spread around, so we'll see. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!